the same campus?" Kwong asked in surprise. Orm immediately covered Kwong's mouth with his hand when his best friend spoke loud enough that several of the staff, including Lingling, looked at the two of them. "Keep your voice down," Orm whispered to Kwong, then smiled at the other staff and removed his hand from Kwong's mouth. "Forgive me," Kwong also whispered this time. "So tell me, do you know Lingling?" Orm moved his chair closer to Kwong and began to tell the story in a low voice. "Yes, he's my senior. When I wanted to rent a room in a boarding house near campus, it turned out there were no empty rooms. I had to stay in the boarding house because my house was quite far away. Suddenly, Peeling offered me to stay with him in his room, but only for a week, because after that Peeling left the boarding house and I never heard from him again, and it turned out that I saw him on TV and had become an artist. If you two know each other, why doesn't Lingling look like he knows you?" asked Kwong, surprised. "Maybe because at that time my appearance was ugly and geeky. I was bullied, but Peeling defended me. That's why I admired her," answered Orm with a small smile. "I was amazed because Peeling was beautiful and kind, even though at that time she was already famous for participating in a Thai beauty pageant." "Ah, no wonder you want this job," Kwong muttered after hearing Orm's story. "But remember, don't let your admiration turn into liking Lingling, because she already has a boyfriend," whispered Kwong, smiling seductively. Orm chuckled softly. "That will never happen. I know Peeling already has a boyfriend, and I'm working with him just to be closer to my idol," Orm answered, smiling confidently. "The shooting schedule for today's advertisement is finally finished." Ling, who had changed into normal clothes, walked calmly towards Kwong and Orm, who were chatting in the corner of the room. Ling had been curious about what the two people were talking about, especially when he heard Kwong talking quite loudly earlier. His curiosity grew stronger. "What are you talking about? I pay you to work, not to chat," Ling said in a firm tone, his eyes glaring at Orm and Kwong. Kwong, who felt a little awkward, responded immediately. "We were talking about Ling's work. I just told Orm about his duties." Kwong took out a notebook from his bag and showed it to Orm. "I gave him a note so he wouldn't make a mistake in taking care of Lingling." "That's right. Kwong has only been training me for the past few days, so I asked him a lot of things," continued Orm, looking at Ling with great respect. Ling was silent for a moment, realizing that he might have guessed wrong. There was an unpleasant feeling in his heart because he had accused Kwong and Orm of chatting about unimportant things. To change the conversation, Ling said, "Kwong, I will go home with Kunmin so you can go home with Orm." "Yes," Kunling answered Kwong obediently. "Before I go home, I will stop by Kunling's house with Orm to put things away and at the same time introduce Kunling's house to Orm." Ling nodded, then in a cold tone he added, "Yes, train him well. Otherwise, he could be fired." Orm, who heard Ling's words, only smiled faintly. "I will train well, Peeling," Orm replied in a serious tone, looking at Ling with respect. Their conversation was interrupted when a voice called Ling's name from behind. "Ling!" The voice sounded calm and caring. Ling looked back and saw a man he knew well. "Min," said Ling with a smile growing on his face. He immediately welcomed the man's arrival with a warm hug. Min, Ling's lover, let go of the hug while returning Ling's smile lovingly. "Shall we go now?" Min asked softly, stretching out his hand towards Ling. "Yes, I've finished everything," Ling answered, then clasped hands, Min tightly. While walking towards the exit, Min greeted the staff who were still in the studio, including Orm and Kwong. We'll go first, he said, friendly. The smile never left his face. Ling then took Min's hand, walking side by side towards the car that was waiting outside. Every time she was with Min, Ling's tiredness seemed to just evaporate, replaced by calm and happiness. Their relationship looked so harmonious, making anyone who saw it feel that they were a perfect couple. On the other hand, Orm could only stand still next to Kwong. His gaze couldn't leave Ling and Min, who were walking together. Kwong, who realized this, whispered softly to Orm, "Don't they look very suitable?" Orm snapped out of his thoughts and immediately turned to Kwong. They look really good together," he answered quickly, a little awkwardly. Orm immediately changed the subject. "Shall we go now?" he asked, remembering that Kwong had said he would go home together. "That's right. We want to go now," answered Kwong as he handed Orm a bag. "Help me carry this, okay?" Orm took the bag that Kwong gave him without saying much. Then the two of them walked together towards the parking lot. Even though they won't, using the same car, Orm will follow Kwong from behind, because Kwong promised to show Lingling Sirilak Kwong's house. Milk, Priking, and Orm were all focused on their phone screens, their eyes glued to their respective phones. The atmosphere was quiet, and the only sound was the game's background music. In the middle of the game, Orm's eyes widened as his cell phone rang, displaying an incoming call from Kwong. Priking shouted again, frustrated that his team had lost again due to Orm's sudden exit from the game. "Wait, I need to take this call," Orm explained as he quickly stood up from his seat to answer the phone. Orm swiped his screen and answered the call from Kwong. "Where are you? Can you come to the CH3 building now? I'm on campus right now, and my class isn't over yet. Hurry to the CH3 building. Kunling wants to see you." "What? Why so suddenly? I haven't prepared anything." "There's nothing to prepare. Come quickly, or you will lose this opportunity." Orm stared at his phone as Kwong ended the call abruptly. He rushed back to his friends, hurriedly grabbing his bag. "Where are you going?" Fu asked, noticing Orm's apparent haste. "I have something to take care of. I have to go now," Orm replied as he packed up his books. "But we have another class after this." "Are you skipping class?" Milk replied, "Yes. Something more important has happened, so I'll be absent." Orm replied. He quickly gathered his things and left. Lingling glanced at the clock on her wrist. 20 minutes had passed since Kwong told her about his friend. The seconds seemed long as she tapped her fingers lightly against her knees, a subtle sign of her growing impatience. "Is he coming or not?" Ling asked Kwong once again, her voice slightly irritated. "He said he will come soon, Kunling. Please wait a little longer," Kwong replied, trying to hide his anxiety. Kwong also waited with bated breath, hoping Orm wouldn't change his mind at the last minute. Moments later, a knock echoed throughout the room. Kwong immediately got up from his seat, his heart beating fast. He really hoped that the person behind the door was Orm. Finally, Kwong let out a sigh of relief as he opened the door and saw Orm standing there. "You finally came," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Orm's morning started later than planned. The alarm clock on his bedside table rang 8 o'clock, but in his sleepy state, Orm turned off the alarm several times before he realized the time had passed. Orm jolted awake when he saw that it was already 9 a.m. Panic sets in when he realizes that he overslept and is now late for his 10 o'clock class. He jumped out of bed, his heart pounding, and rushed to the bathroom. He hurriedly washed his face, brushed his teeth, and put on the first clothes he found, namely a simple cream-colored shirt and jeans, his hair left neatly loose. Orm grabbed his bag, which he luckily prepared the night before, and ran out of his room. He barely had time to put on his shoes as he rushed into the kitchen to say goodbye. "May, I'm going to campus first," Orm called out breathlessly as he stopped by the kitchen door. May Koi looked up from her tea, her expression calm and unsurprised. He had seen Orm's routine like this before. "You overslept again, didn't you?" May Koi asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. Orm nodded shyly, trying to catch his breath. "Yeah." Orm didn't hear the alarm. "Or maybe I just ignored it. I was really late this time." May Koi shook her head, although there was no scolding in her tone. She was used to Orm's busy mornings, and she knew her daughter always managed to get it done in the end. "You need to stop staying up late and playing games until late," Orm said May Koi warningly. I know," Orm replied as he walked towards the main door. "I promise I won't stay up late again." May Koi put down her cup of tea, then followed Orm. "Did you at least take something to eat?" May Koi asked, worry beginning to emerge in her voice. Orm fell silent, realizing he forgot to eat breakfast altogether. He shook his head. "There's no time for that breakfast today. I'll buy something on the way." May Koi sighed but didn't mind it. "Make sure you eat, okay? May doesn't want you to starve all day." Orm nodded quickly. "Yes, May, I really have to go," Orm said, then got into his car. May Koi waved at him with a gentle smile. Okay, be careful on the road and don't speed. You will definitely arrive on time." "Thank you, May. Goodbye." Orm shouted and waved his hands before driving his car and leaving the house. "What's wrong? Just tell us," Tanakorn said softly, encouraging her daughter to speak. Orm spoke frankly, getting straight to the point with her parents. "Today, I met Kwong, my middle school friend, and he offered me the chance to replace him as an artist's personal assistant. And I want to try this job." Tanakorn looked puzzled by her daughter's sudden statement. Are you serious? What about your studies?" "Orm can manage to study and work." "Phew, I want to gain new experience," Orm replied confidently. May Koi, who had already given her approval, added, "May doesn't see any problem with it. Being an artist's assistant doesn't seem too hectic, and Orm can still focus on his studies when the artist is not busy." "Thank you, May." Orm smiled at his mother, but his gaze quickly shifted to his father, who still looked hesitant. "What about Fu? Will you let me do this?" Tanakorn hesitated, considering his daughter's request. On the one hand, she wanted Orm to focus on college to continue the family business. But on the other hand, Tanakorn saw Orm's eager determination. Sighing heavily, Tanakorn finally said, "All right, Fu will allow it, but only if you promise to keep your grades high and not let your grades get low." Thank you very much, Fu." Orm immediately hugged his father tightly. "Orm promises to stay focused on my studies." Tanakorn nodded as he returned his daughter's hug, knowing that in the end he wanted his daughter to be happy with whatever Orm wanted. He understood that when Orm was determined to try something new and positive, it was hard for them to say no. Today, Ling decided to spend her free time looking for a new assistant. Accompanied by Kwong, her current assistant, and Saint, her manager, Ling sat in one of the chairs, conducting interviews and asking various questions to the candidates. Sighing heavily, Ling could only lean back in her chair feeling exhausted. For several days, she had been interviewing applicants, yet not a single one met her strict criteria to become her personal assistant. "Are there any more candidates?" Ling asked Kwong. "There are still a few left." "Can Ling, should we finish the interviews now?" Kwong replied, sensing the confusion in Ling's expression. "Let's finish it now," Ling replied, his eyes fixed on the paper he was holding. The atmosphere that night felt warm and comfortable, accompanying their steps into the restaurant they had chosen. Even though Ling was aware that there were several cameras capturing his moments, together with Min, this had become normal for him. Working in the entertainment world makes them both always in the spotlight, even when they are enjoying their personal time. However, Ling was used to such situations, and the presence of cameras no longer bothered him. After waiting for a while, the food ordered by Min and Ling arrived. The two of them began to enjoy the dishes while engaging in light conversation. "I forgot to ask, who was the woman with Kwong earlier?" Min asked while looking at Ling curiously. "His name is Orm Kornnaphat. He's my new assistant," Ling answered calmly after finishing chewing his food. "Huh, you wanna hire that young girl as an assistant?" Min frowned, a little surprised. "He's the same age as Kwong. I hired him because he was a recommendation from Kwong, so I believe Kwong wouldn't recommend the wrong person," Ling answered casually while sipping her drink. "Ah, thank goodness. I also believe that it was Kwong's suggestion," said Min with relief before continuing to eat. "But my advice, it's better if you also know his background, such as his social media. Have you checked it?" Ling, who was enjoying his meal, suddenly fell silent, remembering that he had not had time to ask for LINE or media contact. "Social Orm, I'll ask for it later," Ling muttered softly, focusing back on his food. It was 8 in the evening when Orm finally arrived at his apartment. He decided to live there because it was closer to campus and Ling's house. Usually, Orm only spends time at his parents' house on weekends or when he feels like going home. After entering the apartment, the first thing Orm did was take a shower to freshen up his tired body. After that, he changed clothes and sitting on a chair, his hand reached for the bag he had brought earlier, then took out the book that Kwong had given him. "Is peeling this complicated now?" he muttered, reading a few pages of the book. Orm opened page after page, trying to remember the details of his work intently. Suddenly, a notification sound from the Line application was heard. Orm, who was still focused on the book in his hand, fumbled with his cell phone on the table. His eyes widened when he saw the notification came from Lingling Kwong. "Shia," he exclaimed, half surprised. He hurriedly checked the Line profile to make sure, and sure enough, the message was indeed from Ling. In the message, Ling only asked Orm to save his contact. Orm immediately replied to the message, but after several minutes passed, there was no reply from Ling. Feeling he had had enough of waiting, Orm decided to put his cell phone back and focus on reading his book again. The white car stopped right in front of a luxurious house. Orm got out of his car carefully, then stood for a moment beside the vehicle, looking at the large house in front of him. The house belonged to Ling, where he had been working for the past week. Even though he had worked for Ling for several days, nervousness still often appeared, especially now when he came alone. Kwong, who previously always accompanied him, was now gone, making his visit this time feel different. Orm grabbed several things from the back seat of the car. His hands and feet felt hesitant as he was about to step towards the main door. Holding his breath, he stared at the door of Ling's house, gathering the courage to enter. From behind the window, Ling had been watching Orm for a long time. Seeing his assistant just standing still in front of the house, he decided to open the door and call him. "Why are you still standing there? I'm so hungry waiting for the food." Ling's voice sounded a little rushed, bringing Orm out of his thoughts. Orm immediately raised his head, recovered from his doubts, and saw Ling already standing at the door. "Sorry I'm a little late, peeling, but I've brought food for breakfast," said Orm with a faint smile, showing the plastic food he was carrying. "Come in quickly, you always come in late," Ling grumbled. His face was a little sour because he had waited too long, even though he usually finished breakfast half an hour ago. Orm immediately stepped in following Ling. "I'm sorry, peeling. The queue at the shop where peeling usually buys breakfast was very long, so I had to wait," said Orm in a low voice. "Sorry for making his boss wait. I don't want to hear your apologies. Hurry up and prepare breakfast," Ling answered briefly as he walked towards the dining table. "Wait a moment, peeling." Orm immediately went to the kitchen and started preparing food. His hands were deft at opening food wrappers and arranged them neatly on a plate. Meanwhile, Ling sat at the dining table, folding his arms with his gaze never leaving Orm. After everything was ready, Orm served food and drinks in front of Ling. "Please eat, peeling," he said softly with a faint smile on his face. "I'll wait in the living room and prepare some things," continued Orm, bowing politely before leaving. However, Ling suddenly spoke. "Sit here and accompany me for breakfast." Orm was a little surprised to hear Ling's order. "I feel bad. Besides, has Kwong ever accompanied peeling to eat together? Because according to Kwong's notes, peeling likes to eat alone." Ling looked at Orm with a flat look. Without saying anything, he grabbed Orm's hand and pulled him to sit in the chair beside him. "You talk too much. You can't believe everything written," Ling said in a cold tone. "Sorry if I said too much, peeling." Orm smiled faintly as he looked down, feeling guilty for saying too much. Ling then began to slowly enjoy her breakfast. Occasionally he glanced at Orm, who was now sitting quietly beside him. Orm didn't say a word, just sat quietly while waiting for Ling to finish eating. After completing all the tiring photo shoot sessions and advertising shoots, Ling finally arrived home. His feet stepped slowly in, and without thinking, he immediately fell on the sofa. His tired body leaned against the soft back of the sofa, enjoying a moment of relief because today his schedule finished early. In the afternoon, Ling looked at Orm, who was busy tidying up his belongings, working quickly and neatly as usual. However, something felt different. Ling noticed that throughout the day, Orm seemed quieter. If with the rest of the crew, Orm could still joke and be cheerful, when he was with Ling, there was a cold impression. This made Ling a little confused. "Orm," Ling called, his voice low but firm. "Yes, Phi," Orm answered quickly. After finishing tidying up his things, Orm immediately approached Ling, standing straight in front of him. "I've tidied everything up, including preparing dinner. Does peeling want anything else?" Ling stared at Orm for a moment, his eyes trying to find a clue in his young assistant's face. However, Orm's expression remained calm, showing no signs of irritation or disturbance. "I don't want anything anymore," Ling finally answered, his voice sounding a little softer than usual. Orm nodded, smiling faintly. Tomorrow there's a schedule for a live event in the afternoon. I will come as soon as possible after my lecture schedule is finished, he said, explaining in a flat but polite tone, as usual. Okay, Ling answered briefly, even though his heart was still wondering about Orm's change in attitude today. Min just chuckled as he placed his hand on Orm's head, as he often did when they still met frequently. Of course, I missed you, he said in a gentle tone. Fi misses your quibbling, he continued, ruffling Orm's hair gently. Min, Orm exclaimed while pretending to be angry. He immediately straightened his now messy hair. Sorry. Min laughed at Orm's reaction. He quickly helped Orm straighten his hair again. Have you had dinner? If not, let's have dinner together. Fi has a lot to tell you, said Min in a friendly tone. Orm was silent for a moment, pretending to be sulking because his hair was being ruffled by Min. He pursed his lips, signaling that he was still upset. Min, who already knew Orm very well, immediately put her arm around his shoulder. Fi will treat you. You can eat whatever you want, he said coaxingly, knowing very well how to melt Orm's heart. Orm finally couldn't hold it in and nodded, accepting Min's offer. It was a coincidence that his stomach was starting to feel hungry because he hadn't eaten since this afternoon. Min took Orm to a restaurant that was familiar to them. This restaurant holds many memories. A historical place where Min invited Orm to eat together for the first time. After entering the restaurant, Min let Orm choose the seat he wanted. Orm chose a table near the window overlooking the small garden outside. They sat opposite each other and Min called the waiter to order food. After the order was taken, the waiter left them, and the atmosphere turned silent for a moment. The two of them looked at each other in silence, a silence that had no awkwardness. So, how is Fi's research going in Khao Yai? Orm finally broke the silence with a tone full of curiosity. Still in progress. Looks like I still have to go back there again, answered Min casually, his smile wide, showing that he was not too burdened by his work. Even though Orm knew that the medical research that Min was undertaking would definitely demand a lot of time and energy, Orm chuckled at that answer. It's a good thing I didn't major in medicine. If I did, maybe I would be as stressed as Fi, he said in a teasing tone, his eyes glinting mischievously. Min Nikakun, a 25-year-old man, is Orm's senior on campus. Min is a medical student from Chulalongkorn University's Faculty of Medicine. Not only is he a senior on campus, Min is also the son of Orm's father's best friend. Orm's father, who was worried about his daughter's bad experiences at previous campuses, decided to transfer Orm from Mahidol University to Chulalongkorn University. He also asked Min to look after Orm while he was there, and even planned to match Orm with Min. Orm then tried to open the car door, intending to get out. However, his movements were stopped when Ling suddenly pulled his hand. Quickly, Ling placed one hand on the car seat, locking Orm's body in place, leaning against the seat. Now the distance between them is very close. Only a few inches separate them. I don't want you to talk casually. I want you to talk to me normally, as usual, Ling said. His voice firm, but there was gentleness behind his words. His eyes looked straight at Orm's eyes, filled with seriousness. Orm returned the gaze, no less serious. Didn't Fi say it was me? Talk too much, so I'm cutting it down, he answered, trying to maintain eye contact. even though the atmosphere was getting awkward. Several seconds passed, as if the world around them disappeared. Ling's eyes stared at Orm's face, as if hypnotized. However, he quickly recovered and pulled himself backwards, away from Orm. Basically, I want you to talk as usual, Ling said once again before finally getting out of the car. He left Orm, who was still sitting quietly in the car. Okay, peeling, Orm answered even though Ling had already walked away. His words seemed to only speak to empty air. Ling walked quickly towards his house. Arriving at the door, he stopped for a moment, took a deep breath to try to calm his heartbeat, which was suddenly beating faster than usual. He felt strange about his own feelings, something that rarely happened. Ling turned around and was surprised to see Orm standing in front of him. The woman looked calm, with a smile always on her face. All the work is finished, so I'll go home first, said Orm, his voice soft and friendly. Ling just nodded slowly. Yes, please go home, he answered in a flat tone, but his eyes were still averted from Orm. Orm smiled faintly again, nodding slightly. Okay, then I'll say goodbye, he said before turning around and walking away. Ling remained standing where he was, even though his eyes were turned away. He occasionally stole glances at Orm, who was getting further away, until finally the woman's figure completely disappeared from his sight. The morning routine that Lingling Sirilak Kwong never misses is doing exercise, even if only for a short time. But because today her schedule is free, Ling decided to spend more time exercising. After that, she will go out with her friends.